everyone. We are Britt and Drea from motherhoodalliance.com, and we are excited to welcome you to a 4-episode series with Dr. Mitch Sutton, a chiropractor and the founder of Reclaim Health. Dr. Mitch is a powerhouse of knowledge. You're going to learn that in these 4 episodes, as he specializes in not only the nervous system, but also immune dysfunction, barrier permeability, which is the gut and the brain-blood barrier connection, mold toxicity, eczema, allergies, asthma, autoimmune, and neurodegenerative disorders. Using advanced testing and targeted support, Dr. Mitch helps patients truly connect the dots of their health in order to understand how their body is actually functioning so they can stop guessing and they can actually start healing. And when he's not helping patients reclaim their health, he's a husband and a dad of 2 girls. We are really excited to introduce him to you now.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Motherhood Alliance podcast. We are back here with Dr. Mitch from Reclaim Health. Welcome back, Dr. Mitch.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this episode, we're going to be talking more about the autoimmune disorders that you typically see. And so I guess how would you define autoimmunity? And, what are some examples?
The classic answer is that your immune system starts to attack your own body. Like your immune system is doing something wrong and creating an autoantibody somewhere in your body, right? Which is like, I don't like that. Okay, that's not a great understanding. It's not a great, because you can't do anything. Like it doesn't give people, oh, this is just how it is, and there's nothing that we can do about it. Which is, you can do everything about it to resolve some of these issues. There's obviously a lot of things that are going to create damage and inflammation inside your body. Now, inflammation is not a bad thing. It is normal. That is how your body heals. Okay. When you stub your toe, smash your hand, that has to go back to its normal state. When people can't resolve that inflammatory process, that's where technically what happens is that this, whatever tissue that it is constantly damaged, constantly irritated, and there's parts of your immune system that always are sampling what that damaged tissue is. And it does this because it's trying to protect your body from if there's an infectious agent or toxin that's trying to do it. But if it's not a toxin, or if it's not a infectious agent, which most likely a lot of times in the autoimmune side of things is that's what it is. But that tissue is constantly being broken apart, and your immune system is constantly sampling that tissue, which is exposing itself to, I'll say, the T helper cell, the adaptive immune system that's pushing the body like, hey, is this my body? Is this my body? Is this my body? Is this my body? And eventually you kind of run out of resources a little bit, and your body basically says, this has been constantly inflamed. We're going to start creating an immune response to it, which is where you then produce the autoantibody. So it more so has to do with stopping and resolving that inflammation so that the body's not constantly, whatever tissue that's damaged inside the body is creating that immune exposure to the system that says like, hey, we're under attack. There's a lot to this thing. You have these things called antigen presenting cells, right? It's part of your innate immune system that says, hey, this is something that we're dealing with. What do we do? And if it's, again, it takes a little piece of whatever thing that's in the body, whether it is normally, right? If it's a bacteria, if it's a virus, or if it's a fungus, or if it's a environmental toxin, and says, hey, this is not good for us. What do we do with it? Let's get rid of it. Now, if that is your body's own tissue, that same process happens. And when that's constantly irritated, that antigen presenting cell, right, takes a piece of whatever that is and presents it to that immune system that says, this is something that's constantly damaged inside the body. We need to get rid of it. And then it goes in and attacks it. So is kind of the, first step in understanding some of those pieces. But there's a lot more of what's actually going to create some of that damage inside the body.
Yeah, so there's different types of autoimmune disorders, right? So there's ones like Hashimoto's, where I have heard of people putting that into remission. There's other ones like rheumatoid arthritis or MS, or like these other ones
Do you believe that all of these diseases could be put into remission? Like all of them?
Yeah. And I say that hesitantly because it's not necessary. Like yes, 100%. But there's also the piece of, do we have enough time and resources in order to, resolve that issue, right? Because it also depends on how long somebody's been dealing with one of these issues. And this isn't just, 2-3 months, everything's better. If you've been dealing with a chronic autoimmune issue for 20 years, it's going to take us a little time. There's that piece of like, okay, what part do we need to start with, and where do we need to go? And because there's this, again, not everybody's equal, but also where you start with somebody, if it's a really bad flare or if it's been a chronic issue and they've already changed some of the lifestyle things, right? They're trying to make sure that they put good food inside their body, and they're trying to, they make sure they're vitamin D, and they're already taking some supplement stuff. Those are all helpful things that kind of, okay, is it this piece? Is it this piece? Is it this piece? Is it this piece? Because in some cases, you just have to kind of calm down the system, right? You have to slow down that immune system process in how it's creating inflammation. Because if you just kick in and start, let's go after stuff, and your body's already inflamed, it's actually going to make things worse, because there's so much of that destruction that's already happening. And then you're stimulating more of that response to like, we're just creating more destruction inside the body. You're going to have issues. So there's times where, depending on how severe, how inflamed, what kind of issues are, of where you need to kind of start with some of those things.
So, okay, we talked in the last episode about barriers. Is that kind of where you're always starting? Is those tests that you talked about, and just kind of getting a 10,000 foot view of what's going on in the body?
Yeah. Now, I'll say 90% of the time, right? Autoimmune issues are from some sort of barrier dysfunction. And that barrier dysfunction is what's going to shift and change how immune system works. And it's this entire zigzag pattern. It's this entire teeter-totter piece, because any inflammation inside a barrier is going to increase something called your Th2 immune response, which is the reactivity side of things, which then that increased Th2 is what suppresses your Th1 or your pathogen fighting side of things. So if you do have an infectious agent that's creating this, cross reactivity, molecular mimicry to the tissue, then you can't clear out the pathogen, which then that tissue is going to constantly be inflamed. Now, the next piece of this is that there's another cell that's called a T17 cell. Okay, Th17. When that cell is elevated, that is what continues to create the tissue autoimmune destruction. And that cell is kept in line, that is normalized by a normal functioning Th1. So in this pattern, if you will, if you see, and you can measure all these things, which is this lymphocyte map test is so cool, because it looks at the balance, it looks at the ratios, it looks at your Th17, looks at something called a T regulatory cell, looks at your Th1, Th2, natural killer cells, CD8 cells, like all of these cells that are a part of this journey. But if a Th17 cell is elevated, you can kind of trace it back to a barrier issue, because you have to you have to increase your Th1, but Th1 is suppressed because you have a high elevated Th2, which is from the inflammation that's happening inside the barrier. So you fix the barrier, you normalize your Th2, which normalizes your Th1, which then stops the destructive Th17 process from happening.
I wish you had a whiteboard right now, honestly, for those who are on YouTube. But I was just going to say,
I could get it if that works.
I was just going to say, for those of you listening, Dr. Mitch, he is on social media doing educational videos all the time with his whiteboards. The way you explained that was perfect, because you could definitely follow what you're talking about. And you're bringing me back to college, because I have a lot of like microbiology and human anatomy classes, and Th1 or T1, T2. Those I've heard before, but this like T17 thing, you're blowing my mind here. So just a little shout out for his social media videos that he does, because you're doing like a whole like educational series.
And that's one of those things. Yeah. It's very much like, this is is just how your body works. This is how certain disease processes are set up because, again, this is the information. You do what you want with it.
Right.
This is how this works, right? I'm not trying to, oh, you need to do this or you need to do this. This is just what happens and why these things are occurring inside your body and what things are great to support and how all that works.
I just love, though, how you're teaching this stuff. And if somebody is dealing with an autoimmune disease, or if they're dealing with something that is, whatever it is, right? The way you can explain things, it not only educates them and helps them understand, but it helps motivate them. There is hope, and I can fix this issue, and they know why. And I feel like that's one of the biggest things is, instead of you just saying, hey, do this supplement, take this test because I said so, I'm going to explain some things to you so you can understand, and then you make your own decisions. And more than likely, they're gonna go with what
and people are starving for why. That is such a huge piece that, and this just goes into it further, but people are, I feel like, dying for taking responsibility for themselves to do something. But if they don't have direction and if they don't understand, or if nobody's walked them through, especially in the chronic disease area, it's, well, you go to your rheumatologist, right? You go to your medical doctor and they're going to put you on some sort of immune suppressing medication. And that's just going to shove down just all of those cells. Now, there's this loop that happens because that same shift in your Th2, Th1, Th17 is the exact same presentation of immune system that shows up in cancer patients, because your Th1, which is your pathogen fighting side of things, is also your tumor fighting side of things. And so you have this autoimmune issue, and then you suppress immune system because you don't want the flare or the reaction, which then you suppress all of those cells, which then you're creating that environment for then cancers to go through. And then you go through your chemo and your radiation, which just wipes your body out even more and creates more autoimmune issues, and around and around and around and around you go. That's a common loop that people have of, oh, I have this autoimmune issue and then I get cancer and then now I'm back to an autoimmune issue, and then environment set up for some of those things to happen again.
I'm kind of laughing a little bit because in my head, as you're talking about that, something that popped in my head is is there a Th1 supplement? Because there's a supplement for everything nowadays, like GLP-1s. It's like, okay, well, this is something created in your body. Let's make something orally you can take to boost that, right? And it's like, where's the Th1 supplement?
Technically, then, right? That's astragalus does that. That's going to drive and that's going to help immune system signaling in pushing more of a Th1. Berberine does that. There's something that's also called andrographis. There's certain supplements that, if you know how body is presenting, that are going to very much help support your body in that sense. Especially in an autoimmune case, astragalus is a go-to because that's going to help support and push that Th1. But also there's this other immune signal that's called STAT3 that's what stimulates that 17 and creates more of that tissue destruction. But astragalus also inhibits that STAT3. So you can already get started on certain things because, again, an autoimmune issue it's not an organ specific issue. Yes, right? But it's a system issue, right? It's an immune system dysfunction issue. And so if you know how that system and what that looks like in a disease process, then it doesn't matter if it is Hashimoto's or if it's hypothyroid or if it's Graves' disease or if it's MS or if it's lupus or if it's Crohn's or colitis. Again, autoimmune issue, what's immune system doing? How do we already start supporting those pieces?
Let's talk about genetics a little bit, though, because even in our first episode, you had talked about how somebody who's having barrier permeability or dysfunction, their symptoms may come through as asthma, and then somebody else may come through as eczema, and somebody else may come through as XYZ. So where does genetics fall into play here? Does it just mean that if you are having an autoimmune response,
likely, like if your mom had RA, you may be more likely your response would come out through RA, whereas someone else's would come out through Hashimoto's or different things, because these different immunity pieces are attacking different areas of your body. So how is that kind of deciphered? Is that genetic?
There's the science of something called epigenetics. Okay, epigenetics is how your body is either going to turn on or turn off specific genes based on the environment that you put it in. Okay, now, like, yes, obviously you get your genetic code from your family, but also you get your habits in your environment and how you live your life also from your family, what you grew up with. And there can be certain situations that, like, okay, you have a family history of this. Yes, you get your genetic response from your family, but also that environment that's going to trigger and lead to that gene flaring. But also you see where, it's not the end all be all say all, because there's family history of like, oh, 4 of my sisters have this and the one sister doesn't. Why is that one different? Right? Like, this happens all the time, where this is not just a death sentence, if you will, right? Like that you're automatically going to get these things, right? Because if you change that environment and know what's actually creating the inflammation and the triggers, like, that's where you can genetics don't really have a major play in this. Now, saying that, okay, is that there are some specific genetic tests that you can look at. That there's one specifically that if you have a hard time actually absorbing vitamin D, and if your body has a difficult time with this, then it's more like, okay, you just need to make sure that you support your body with more of this, right? Because let's just say somebody takes 5,000 IUs of vitamin D and their blood levels are 80s, 90s, and somebody takes 5,000 IUs of vitamin D and their blood levels are, in the 20s, which this, like, 20 is not good. Like, I shoot for like 100. This is too, right? Like, technically toxic levels of vitamin D don't happen until they're like 270. So it's like a high amount.
Yeah.
And, oh, you're around 100, you're going to build toxicity. Like, you're not. It's okay. But I mean, vitamin D is incredibly important, and stimulating actually your something called a T regulatory cell, which regulates self or non-self. That's the tolerance cell. And so giving more of those resources to see, oh, is the self or non-self? But if that tolerance is there, it's just going to attack. And that's a major piece of that. There's some other glutathione deficiency issues that people have, that, like the antioxidant side of things, of if you can't get this out of your body, right, then that's where you're also going to see some chronic inflammatory response inside of tissue, because you can't resolve some of that inflammation inside of there. So there are very much cases where, if you get stuck, if I'll say the usual things of what we're doing, right, if healing barrier and making sure that immune system's balanced. But if there's still some of those issues, then it's like, okay, maybe we do need to look a little bit further at what part of your body just may need a little bit extra support, or how do we have to do it a little bit differently because of how some of that genetic abnormality is going to be presented.
Realistically, if someone has been dealing with an autoimmune disorder for years, let's say 5 years, what is the time frame mentally that they should be prepared for the healing process?
Such a loaded question.
I know, and everybody's different, but just, it's not a quick fix like we're talking about. It's not going to be a 2 months of supplements thing. This, like, plan on the number of years you've been suffering, the number of years it takes.
In saying this, is I've had people.
And what does it include too? Yeah.
Yeah. So certain antibodies, they have a half-life, how long that they actually last inside your body. Thyroid antibodies, those are good, like 5-6 months that they last. So sometimes, like, measuring every month isn't efficient, because they're still going to be stimulated, because you just haven't had the time to heal some of that stuff. Now, saying that, I've also had some of the antibodies level drops before that. There's a couple patients that she had thyroid issues, and I just started giving her some vitamin D because it was pretty low, and you already saw a shift. You already saw a change in how the autoimmune response was affecting her body. And again, which piece is creating the issue for each person? I mean, more so, it's the the questions and the exam when I go through, right? Because every time I ask a question, and sometimes they're all over the place, but the question is basically, what is this body system doing? And what pathway is not working appropriately? And this is something I'd like to share, like why medications have side effects, right? Medications have side effects because it manipulates a specific biochemical pathway inside the body. And, like in last episode, your body's complex, but it's not complicated. That biochemical pathway, that same pathway happens in more than one organ system inside the body. So if you're manipulating a pathway over here, because it's a lock and key mechanism, right? Like it has to then manipulate all of those other things that are in some of those other organs, which is where then you see the dysfunction. But the pathway is the pathway. And if that's not working, it's not working. And asking some of those questions tells me, okay, is it this one? 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 Which then, okay, this is probably the test that we need to do based on what your body's presenting, what other issues that you have going on. There's so much in just having the conversation with people that you can find out so much more information, which I feel like is almost a lost art. Like it's having the conversation and understanding where people are at is more so kind of what determines like how fast somebody's going to resolve an issue. Now, saying that, okay, I don't really do anything for people. Okay. And I say that with an asterisk here because I show them what to do. This is how you need to make sure that you are taking care of your health. Now, obviously, yes, it's the test and it's the recommendations and this is how all of this works. But if somebody doesn't want to walk through the door, they're not going to get better. And that's their choice. At the end of the day, if they want to do the things and this is how this works, and I will hold your hand, I will push you through the door, I'll drag you through the door, but you got to be the one that goes through the door. But I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to show you all the things.
Yeah, it really is a mental shift from traditional medicine where somebody's like, oh, I have this symptom. And then, they're given a pill and within a week, man, they're feeling better. And all they did is swallow something, right?
Yeah.
What you're saying is this takes action, this takes time, this takes dedication, this takes commitment. And so people have to be ready to do that. But I think when we're talking specifically about autoimmune disorders, a lot of these people are ready. They're just like you were saying earlier, they're just desperate for help. So I think what you're talking about is this can be done for anybody though.
Correct. Right. And usually, okay, resolving the issues can take 6 months, can take a year, can take 5 years, depending on what it is. Now, especially in the first, we'll say 2 to 3 months, if pieces are not feeling better, if you're not seeing some improvement in some sort of sign or symptom, then, okay, we're doing something wrong. Because if you start to get some positive change within the first few months, we're on the right track. Like ding, ding, ding. Yep. And then it's just time, right? Then it's just time. This is what we're going to do. This is what you need to make sure that we keep staying on top of. And then we come back and retest in 3 months, or if it's 4 months, or seeing where some of those pieces are. Because yes, there's the feeling better, which is obviously what people want, but also looking on paper, like, hey, this is physically what changed inside your body is also just incredible. Just last week, she's rheumatoid, right? Joint pain, just gut issues, constantly irritated, inflamed, in pain. And she went to a rheumatologist and had a positive ANA, which is an anti-nuclear antigen, which is a kind of basic autoimmune marker. And it was 3 months. And she retested that ANA and it's back down to normal. So the reversing of and resolving some of that autoimmune response and reaction inside the body it's the coolest thing in the world. Like seeing it on paper is just like, yep, hey, look what happened.
So for her specifically, was it some nutrition changes plus some supplements? Just give us a really high level and quick overview for her.
So
what was the difference?
And this was not her original issue that she came in with. This was more a postmenopausal hormonal dysfunction. But some of that just wasn't getting any better, right? Because there's still some underlying piece that's happening inside the body. And we did a stool test, and like there were some permeability issues, and then we had to kind of shift gears a little bit, be like, oh, okay, this is actually what's going on and what's creating your problem here. And so we started work on healing barrier and making sure digestive systems working appropriately, right? When we talked about previously the chemical, biological, and physical tissue barrier, started putting some of those things back together, and you saw that shift in how immune system and specifically the autoimmune process went back to normal.
Wow. Cool. Amazing.
All right. Well, I'm excited that we still have 2 more episodes coming up because we're not done with you.
Yeah.
And something interesting that I just want to point out is that you're a chiropractor. Not once have you mentioned chiropractic or nervous system stuff yet. So really quick, like how is that tying in to all of the immune talk that we're having?
So technically there's the 2 primary issues that happen with people is that there's something that's creating damage to immune system or something that's creating damage to nervous system. Each one of those can be the first piece that stimulates the other. You can have an inflammatory immune reaction that's going to send the signal to the nervous system, and nervous system is going to do something, right? And the reverse of whatever stress piece is going to create the immune signal, the neurological response is going to create damage to nervous system. When you talk about cortisol, this is a stress hormone. That increases your heart rate, your blood sugar, blood pressure. How it increases your blood sugar, even though you haven't eaten anything, is it starts to eat away at some of your body's own connective tissue. It starts to eat away at your collagen, which is what also holds together your intestinal lining. And so when you start to break apart intestinal lining, then that's where you see the permeability piece, which is going to shift immune system, which is where you're also seeing sometimes people flare, right? Some people have autoimmune triggers because of high periods of stress. Like you got to solve that issue first before you get into some of the other pieces.
All right. Well, I do. We talked briefly about giving a shout out to your social media videos that you've been doing. What are your handles? Where can people find you on social media?
Reclaim Health Clinic is Instagram, and then I think just Reclaim Health Clinic is on Facebook too.
We'll throw it in the show notes.
Yeah,
I
know. This is one of those things, honestly, like I am not a social media guy. It's just not my favorite thing. But these are the videos, these are the things, these are, and again, information on what to do in some of those pieces. So I put them all out there and hopefully somebody sees them.
All right. Well, find them in the show notes, people. You'll find them there. Okay. Well, we're hitting pause on this conversation again. If you guys have not listened to episode 1, make sure you do before we head into episode 3. But we're going to be talking more about those neurodegenerative diseases and like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. These are things that people are so fearful of, especially if they've been in their family. So I really am excited to open up that conversation.
If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider leaving a rating or review or sharing it directly with a friend who could benefit from the information? We know that you're a busy mom or caregiver, and our goal is to make your life easier by bringing tips and tricks directly from experts into your earbuds. By sharing this episode with someone you love, you can play a critical role in helping to make their life easier as well. We appreciate your time, and thank you for being a part of the Motherhood Alliance family.